So with the rise of popularity of taking cinematic photos recently, I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of give you some of my tips and things that I consider when I go out shooting to make a cinematic photo, as I've kind of become known for being some kind of cinematic photographer over on Instagram. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of give you my insights and thoughts when I go out to shoot, to kind of how I get this style of photo. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but I hope it's going to be quick because I don't feel like the things I have to share are really that crazy or groundbreaking. So let's get into it. Tip number one is going to be to shoot always on the shadow side of your subject. And so what this means is that you're going to want to place your subject in between yourself with the camera and your light source. So if you're shooting outdoors, what this means is that you're never going to want to be on the same side shooting your subject as the sun. You're always going to want the sun to be on a different side. Now, this doesn't have to be directly in front of you. It can be kind of off to the side. That's kind of my favorite, where it lights up about 2/3 of their face. But yeah, shooting on the shadow side is a great way to add more depth and contrast and create a more visually interesting image. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is to stop looking into the camera. Now, this is a pretty obvious one when it comes to filmmaking and making things look cinematic. Traditionally, the camera doesn't exist in movies. It is a tool for the audience to see into what the characters are experiencing, but the characters themselves do not know that the camera is there. So they obviously never look into it. So when I'm out shooting photos, I tend to have my model either look off to one side, I have them look directly over my shoulder, but I very rarely have them look directly into the lens. Now, of course, there are gonna be times you're gonna want your subject to look into camera, and of course, this is also the case in film as well, but I think on the whole, having less photos looking into the camera and just kind of more like you're capturing this person's life is going to provide a more cinematic look to your photos. Tip number three is to direct and not pose. Now, what I mean by this is don't give your subject a pose or get really strict with them about where their arms are or what their body's doing or where they're, how to tilt their head, things like that, but to give them guidance and direction on actions that they can do in the scene, and then capture them as they do those actions. Again, obviously in film, things are moving. It's a movie. So when it comes to photographing like a movie, you're gonna wanna photograph movement. So for me, I don't really pose my models or subjects super often. I tend to give them scenarios or sequences to kind of act out. So something I like to do, because I go into every shoot trying to tell a story. In my mind, I'm not taking portraits, I am crafting a narrative. And so a lot of times I will give my models or subjects a kind of broad idea of what I'm thinking or what would be happening in this scene, if you will. And so, for example, like if we're on the beach, I'll tell them, hey, you are a wife who is coming to the ocean every single day because your husband shipped off to war. So I want you to walk up and down this coast, looking out onto the horizon, thinking that maybe today is the day that he's coming back home, and I want them to have that kind of emotion and kind of be an actor a little bit, and have them walk up and down with this kind of vision in their head, evoking some emotion and then trying to capture them as they do it. But yeah, I think giving these kind of directions and actions will not only make your photos look more cinematic, but they will also look more natural. I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable modeling or posing if it's not something they do super often, and it'll give your photos a more lifelike feel and less of like a posed photo. Tip number four is movement is kind of king these days. In the last few months, this kind of genre of blurry photos or these kind of motion blurred photos of people running around and doing things that aren't crystal clear have become very popular. And I think there's something that I've just recently started implementing, but I do think they go a long way to creating more emotion and creating that more cinematic look. I'm so sorry I've said that word so many times probably in this video. But yeah, I think when it comes to these blurry photos, I think using them sparingly is probably best. They're not ones that I want like the entire gallery to consist of, but I think they are good kind of accent photos to kind of give some contrast to, the other types of photos you'll be taking on a shoot. Just like in a movie, there are those kind of chaotic, motion blurred scenes where you feel like you're in the action, but there's also still moments as well where you can just kind of sit with the characters and kind of discuss them where the camera's not blurry or moving all over the place. So again, I think pairing these blurry photos with more traditional photos is going to be a great way to create contrast and more intrigue and emotion into your photo sets. And lastly, number 5 is wardrobe is king. Now, I believe I made a whole video on this topic not too long ago, but coordinating your outfit to the location, or the outfit of your subject, that is, with the location you'll be shooting in, is probably the best way to make your photos look more like a film. It'll also make your photos stand out because it will show that you put thought into the story you're trying to tell. You know, you didn't just grab a beautiful person and a beautiful location and just go shoot photos with no direction, but it'll show that you put thought into these photos that you're taking and the scene you're trying to set. A good rule of thumb that I follow when I'm trying to kind of design a wardrobe around the photos that I'm gonna take is I usually decide where the location's gonna be first, kind of the time frame that the photos are gonna be set in, like are these like 1970s, 1980s, are these like modern? And I also think about the tone I want to evoke. Are these, you know, pretentious? Are these casual? You know, things like that. And that can dedicate the style of wardrobe that you'll want for the shoot. Again, fitting with the story that you're trying to tell. All of this aside, the most important thing to consider when doing wardrobe is that the color palette of the wardrobe matches the color palette of the location you're gonna be shooting in. Now, when it comes to film and movies, you'll notice that the wardrobe that, you know, the actors or characters are wearing always matches the same color palette as their location, giving it this cohesive feel that makes it feel like those people belong in that setting. So if you disregard everything else when it comes to wardrobe, just try and make sure the color palette and the color tones in the wardrobe match the color palette and tones of your location. So again, if I'm shooting at the beach, you know, with lots of blues and tans, I'm gonna want blues and tans in the wardrobe. Or if I'm shooting in like a vintage looking home, then I'm gonna want vintage looking clothes, and that also match the color and aesthetic of the home, like the wallpaper, the carpets, everything like that. But yeah, those are 5 tips for taking more cinematic looking photos. These are things that I implement when I go out to shoot, but of course these aren't the only things you can do to make your photos feel like a movie. These are just a few of the ones that I like to think about and consider when I go out to shoot. Hopefully this video wasn't too long. Thank you so much for stopping by. Make sure to leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this current state of cinematic photography. To be honest, I am kind of tired of that word, but I guess I kind of contribute to the problem. So it is what it is. Is this kind of just a fading trend, or is this going to be a genre of photography that's going to kind of stick around for a while? I guess it'll remain to be seen. But yeah, leave me your thoughts down in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching.